Hello, I'm Rona Rutchik, and I'm your host today at Arts Talk. Today we are going to take a behind-the-scenes view at the Wadsworth Atheneum in Hartford, Connecticut, and the New Britain Museum of American Art in New Britain, Connecticut. Museums are scattered all over the United States, in cities both large and small and everything in between. And they are, each one, very different from one another, each with its own focus, each in different style, each in different shape, each in different size. They are important and interesting because within their collections and their site, they disclose people. They disclose people from yesteryear, people who used to live there, people's interest in their commerce, interest in their social life, interest and abilities within their socioeconomic status. They also disclose people in the community contemporary with today. Who goes to a museum, and how does a museum nourish and entertain its citizens? When I go to a museum, I'm interested not only in what I can see, but I'm just as curious in what I don't see. I want to know what's in the storage rooms. Who makes the decision between what gets shown and what's not shown? Where does the money come from for those beautiful exhibitions and the wonderful PR? Who bills and how is it decided about the pedestals that the beautiful sculpture sits on, or the wonderful wall displays that we see? How do the breaks or the rips get fixed? There's so many questions that a behind-the-scenes kind of look might be able to answer, that if you, like I, am interested in those things, you'll be very happy to spend this time with us today, because I have wonderful guests, museum professionals both from the Wadsworth Atheneum and from the New Britain Museum of American Art, who will take us hand by hand behind the scenes of their museum so that we can see and get some of these kinds of questions answered. Connecticut boasts many museums, and they are each different. And these two museums, the Wadsworth Atheneum and the New Britain Museum of American Art, are two of the wonderful ones Connecticut boasts. I'd like you to meet my guests, Muriel Fleishmann of the Wadsworth Atheneum and Deborah Frizzell of the New Britain Museum of American Art. Thank you so much for coming to the studio today and for inviting us to your museums just a little while ago so that we could prepare some videos that we will share with you later on. Tell me, Deborah, you tell me first, what's your museum like?
Well, actually, our museum is one of the oldest museums of American art. We opened our doors in 1938 in the converted home of Grace Judd Landers. Since that time, we've had 4 major additions built onto the museum. We have approximately 7,000 objects in the collection, and they span from the colonial era to the present day, including our Sanford Low illustration collection, which is unique, and we have a long-term loan from Saul DeWitt. We have a large collection of his that's on long-term loan. So there's a great variety within the focus of American art. We collect solely sculpture, painting, works on paper, prints, no decorative arts, for example. So our focus is very much on American art, but through the entire span of the culture.
Muriel, yours is a little bit different. If we were to come to your museum, what would we see?
Well, to go back to what Deborah said when she said that the New Britain Museum is a focus on American art, in a way, the Wadsworth Atheneum, when it was founded in 1842, was a museum, a contemporary museum of American art, because the founder, Daniel Wadsworth, built a building on a site that he owned in the center of Hartford and installed in it his own personal collection of finest American landscape art at the time. Since then, our museum has grown since 1842, really with the additions of great buildings by other important collectors and important citizens of the Hartford area. So we had, following the great 1842 building, which looks sort of like a castle on Main Street, we then had the Morgan family give a great substantial building, which was to house their European collection. Then we, later in the 19th and 20th century, had other additions, and in the 20th century particularly a very modern building called the Avery Building, which currently houses contemporary art. The collections, as opposed to the building, are very wide-ranging. They're not all-inclusive, but we do think of ourselves as somewhat of a mini-Met in that we have a lot of different collections. And they range from an outstanding collection of American furniture that people come from miles around to see, to, again, the Pierpont Morgan collection of fine ceramics, European ceramics, the Colt collections of great paintings, and also European art, objects that were collected by Mrs. Colt. And then now contemporary art, surrealist art, and an African-American collection, which was bought only a few years ago, 6,000 objects, really chronicling the history of African-American art, and hopefully really bringing in and opening up this whole area of artistic interest to new audiences. So it's a wide-ranging, very large museum, which we're really thrilled we can have in Connecticut. It's probably one of the major museums in Connecticut.
Probably so. And we are very proud, Connecticut is very proud to have both your museums listed. And you have many visitors come to each of your museums, and even though there is a difference already that we can note in size and in focuses of collections, you each have docent programs, so that if a group came, Deborah, do you have a docent who would be able to show a group around?
Yes, very much so. We have a large, wonderful docent volunteer group. We have approximately 55 docents in the museum, and they take over 7,500 children and adults through the museum throughout the year.
So although the museums will differ as we take a look at them, we're going to keep in mind that the needs for the community are met by both museums in some similar and some dissimilar ways. We're going to take a look at a video now, and Muriel, if you will walk us through it. The first video we're going to take a look at is at the Wadsworth Atheneum, behind the scenes, so that we can see what goes on, perhaps if a painting is delivered in a box, how many of those kinds of people will help us get the picture, the piece out, so that when a visitor comes by, the museum is beautiful, the exhibition is lovely, and it looks seamless, even though there's a lot of action going on behind the scenes.
We're looking at contemporary Rauschenberg, a painting which demonstrates perhaps the large collection of paintings that span the abstract expressionist school, the New York school, right up to the present. We're currently in this, in the Avery building. The Avery Court is a beautiful large space, which in fact not only houses our contemporary, the very large pieces of our contemporary collection, but has rooms off of it which have more quickly changing exhibitions of contemporary art. The Matrix Gallery, for instance, will focus on a current artist in a small exhibition geared to showcase a certain type of art. But this very large room is also used, as you can see, for large groups. We can entertain in here. Private entertaining goes on in this room. And it's a beautiful example of architecture, which was built, the Avery building was built in the 30s and was really the height of the career of Chick Austin, a director of the museum who was thought to be very flamboyant, very not only artistic but theatrical. And underneath this beautiful room is a theater we now call the Etna Theater, where performances in the 30s were really groundbreaking performances, whether they were opera or ballet. George Balanchine first performed in America and brought his company and performed in Hartford in this Etna Theater. That's a work by Peter Waite. I think of it almost as surrealist. It's a contemporary work by a Hartford artist and a man who used to be a graphic designer at the Atheneum, who finally left that kind of work and went full-time into his own work. The Martin Office of Museum Education was built right off of the main entrance, or the side entrance actually, of the museum recently to show our greatest interest in education. And inside the studio, the brand new studio, which we really hadn't been able to find a place for kids to do work until this was built. In this, we have summer classes, a summer camp for kids. We have, during the year, all kinds of other programs going on where young people can really develop skills and use their creativity after they have perhaps looked at works in the gallery or have been introduced to works by the education department. We have a strong education department, both for adults and for children, and it's been enhanced by having the proper space available. Mm-hmm. The kids love it, all ages. Sometimes we even do things for very little children when we have big events and we develop something there for them. Well, then behind the scenes, you asked about behind the scenes. My goodness, there's so much work behind the scenes. The less glamorous work, which involves copying. There's our wall of public relations materials. During our anniversary year, we had one major article, I think, in a paper every day. Here's some offices, and of course we're computerized now as much as possible. So this is our membership department. In fact, our membership coordinator working with an intern. We do get a lot of interns, and over the summer we particularly have interns from all over the country. During the course of the year, we have interns from local colleges. When you look out from the offices, you look into the courtyard, the inner courtyard of the museum, and that is part, in the summer, is used for a cafe outside. It is a most delightful place to eat with the art around it, and the sails, which you just saw over it, floating over it, which are a work of art, actually. Mm-hmm. Again, more inside views of the cubby holes, which are the offices. There's a lot of space out of view of the public, which isn't as attractive as our lovely public spaces, but very well located for us, and we're all able to interact. There is a large staff, but really there are only about 8 or 9 curators, and many of them work part-time. And so it's compared to big New York museums, it is not a very large staff. It is maybe ranges between 100, 150 if you count part-time staff. And we do work on teams, on the basis of teams, that we get together and we discuss either an exhibition coming up with all the appropriate people pulled in to form that team. There's our public relations officer, public information officer, or in the case of my department, which is development and external affairs, after an exhibit is chosen, we get together and we have to figure out how to fund it, how to market it, what to do with it. We can't pick what goes up on the walls, but we do have a big say in whether it would be an appropriate exhibition for the museum, and then how to actually use it for the public benefit once it gets chosen. And to us, to my department, that's a big part of what we really should be doing, is making it accessible to the public.
Yes, and you say that you don't pick what goes up on those walls, but as a matter of fact, in that wonderful conference room which we just visited with you and your people having that meeting, who does pick the art that goes up on the walls?
The curators meet regularly, as our department meets regularly, and they meet with the director, and we are called in when there is exhibition planning to be discussed. Ideas for exhibitions might be developed internally from the staff, or they may come from exhibitions that have been organized outside and are offered to us to rent, as it were. And we then have all the curators look at the materials, think about the objects, the quality, the scholarly content, and particularly whether it has a nexus to our collection. In other words, will that exhibit in some way tie to our collection? We wouldn't probably have an exhibition of Chinese art because we have a very small set of objects that are from that period or that part of the world.
So how well it works with what it is you have.
But when it connects, either because it's American paintings or American furniture, or because it's surrealist, or because there are all kinds of connections. We have old masters, so we can have an old master show. We have works on paper, so we will have works on paper. But we do try to pick based on those things, and then whether or not our public, we think, will enjoy it, whether it makes a well-rounded season, and so forth.
Patrick McCackey is your director, and he would be the one in charge, really, above all of the curators, to help choose what art would go on the walls. And we visited him while we were walking all through the museum, and he was kind enough to talk to us on the video. So let's take one little look at Mr. McCackey visiting us at the museum.
35 years ago, the Wadsworth Atheneum mounted an exhibition called Connecticut Collects, and there has been no similar exhibition held at the Wadsworth Atheneum in 35 years. So this year in the fall, we're going to mount a marvelous exhibition called Masterworks from Private Connecticut Collections. And there are two themes to this exhibition. First of all, we've found marvelous paintings, marvelous objects, which have a sort of corresponding echo in the great permanent collections of the Wadsworth Atheneum. And people will be able to come and see what private taste has acquired and how that compares with what was a publicly accessible collection. But the second thing, which is really even more interesting and more important as a theme, private collectors collect with a passion, which public collections simply can't afford. Private collectors really love the works that they buy and that they live with. And one of the greatest masterpieces of this exhibition is going to be the Gustav Klimt of two young girls before an oleander tree. It's the earliest Gustav Klimt in America. There are only 8 pictures by Gustav Klimt in America, and this is the very earliest. And the man who owns this picture, he bought it directly from Gustav Klimt in 1892. It has hardly ever been shown publicly in America, although it has been shown publicly in Europe, and it is a miraculous painting. And how wonderful that we'll be able to contrast this theme of Klimt showing the vulnerability of two young girls, the way in which, like the blossoms, their beauty too will fade, to be able to contrast that with Renoir painting exactly the same subject, same image in Paris 2 years earlier. And whereas Klimt dwells upon the inner life, the Renoir delights in the beautiful surface, the appearance, the wonderful rosy cheeks of the young girls holding the lilac blossoms. Now, what an extraordinary moment that two pictures coming from private collections should illuminate so brilliantly two different aspects of the modern movement around the 1890s. The exhibition ranges widely. It is going to include furniture. Amongst the 25 most important collectors of furniture in America, Tom and Alice Kugelman, here in Hartford, are going to lend 3 of the most priceless objects in their collection. What we want to show is that there is out there in private collections, in private hands in Connecticut, some of the rarest and most beautiful works of art in America at all. And of course, it's a great tribute to the Atheneum that these collectors have been prepared to lend some of their most prized objects to this museum. We look forward to seeing you there.
That's a beautiful room. Here we're going to see it some more.
This is the Renoir that Patrick was referring to. These works were hung in this particular private room, which is not on view for a short period of time. And this room is an interesting place. It's called the Betty Roberts Room, and it's one of our secret weapons at the museum. Patrick is another one, and you could tell by his enthusiasm that people warm to him, and he's very knowledgeable about art and enthusiastic. And the room happens to be a place where we can entertain people, and particularly funders and special guests of the Atheneum. It was given in our anniversary campaign in 1992 to the museum by a man who gave it in honor of his wife. Actually, it was like a birthday present to his wife, gave this gift to the Atheneum, and she's very proud of it, and we all are. We use it a great deal.
How beautiful. What is the room called?
It's the Betty Roberts Room, and named after the woman who
Betty Roberts.
is very much an active, I guess she's an honorary trustee now.
How beautiful. Now, some of the things that are very important to do in a museum is to take care of what it is you have, to conserve it, to fix it, to repair it, and most museums do not have conservation facilities on site, but the Wadsworth Atheneum does. Let's see if we can run some footage. Here we
Yes,
have.
again in our capital campaign, we named our conservation studio for the foundation which gave us the money to endow it. We have 2 curators who take our works and examine them and restore them as needed. When we have works which cannot be restored here, we do send them to specialists all around the country. In fact, we're discussing the fact that we have a Poussin painting which is now just out at the Getty Museum in Los Angeles being restored because it was something that really we've never been able to cope with.
All of those utensils and different ways in which they're able to do things to pictures and sculptures.
Yes, it's very highly technical and sophisticated. The curators, the conservators go around and study original works in other places to be sure that the techniques employed are accurate. We also have, that's Patty Garland, one of the 2. We also have another room in which ceramics are repaired and other objects are framed. We do our own reframing. It is a sophisticated operation.
I remember talking to Patty. She is not only an artist but a chemist, and that's part of the training that one must have so that you can take paint off and put paint on and know what will stay and how it will stay forever.
And today the techniques have to be reversible, have to be something which isn't going to forever change the work in case other discoveries are made which show that things were not as they seem. We also, of course, do employ sometimes x-rays of works, and had an interesting example of sending a Van Gogh painting for x-rays at the local hospital to prove that it was indeed an original. Found another work underneath it which showed that it had to be painted back in the period when it was suspected to be.
Modern technology in use in a museum discloses a contemporary community as well, as the art objects themselves do. Much of this kind of work could not be being done if it weren't that this is the late part of the 20th century, and paints and chemistry of paints is as well known as it is. Here we're in the museum shop, a rather important place in the Wadsworth Atheneum, wouldn't you say?
Well, actually, we like to end all our tours in the museum shop. And we are intending over the next couple of years to really try to become a tourist attraction in Hartford and really get groups from all over to come and end up in the shop.
Yes, because in the shop there are just so many things that one can take away with you to not only remind you of things that you have seen, but also help disclose your sensibilities for the arts when you write to friends, when you buy gifts for children, etc. That was a wonderful behind-the-scenes look, and we'll talk more about the Wadsworth Atheneum after we come back. We will break for just 2 minutes for a public service announcement in a moment, and then we will come back and take a look at a video of the New Britain Museum as well, so that we can compare and contrast the museums, the Wadsworth Atheneum in Hartford and the New Britain Museum of American Art in New Britain. We will be back.
Art is a process that fills our lives. See it, enjoy it. This public service announcement is brought to you by the Griffis Art Center, New London, Connecticut.
Hello, I'm Rona Rutchik again, still your host at Arts Talk today, where we are looking at behind-the-scenes view at the Wadsworth Atheneum in Hartford, Connecticut, and the New Britain Museum of American Art in New Britain, Connecticut. And we're here with our professionals from the museums, Muriel Fleishmann from the Wadsworth Atheneum, and Deborah Frizzell from the New Britain Museum of American Art. We've just taken a look at behind the scenes at the Wadsworth Atheneum and gotten kind of a clue as to all of the activity that goes on there behind the walls and in the basement. And we're going to take a look at the New Britain Museum now. Deborah, will you be able to take us through your museum and introduce us to some of the behind-the-scenes activity so that we can get a glimpse as to how everything gets organized so beautifully when we come as visitors to New Britain?
Terrific. It'd be a pleasure.
Great.
Enjoy that.
We have some footage to roll. Here we go.
Okay. We're entering the converted home of Grace Judd Landers, a turn-of-the-century home. And you're right now in the library or guest room at the museum. And we can see a painting, a Peel painting, and our information desk. I think that one of the features of our museum is the intimacy, the atmosphere that's evoked as soon as you walk into the door. And some of our oldest paintings from the colonial era are in this older part of the museum. It's a very comforting sort of atmosphere, as you can say, very much evoking the homey atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. It's very personal kind of space.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you can see a Gilbert Stuart painting as we're panning through, and soon we'll come to a John Singleton Copley painting of Lydia Lind Walters. Our oldest painting in this museum is by John Smibert, and we have an entire collection of portraits from the colonial era. You'll see a Mather Brown soon, yes, and a John Smibert, Ralph Earl.
Many of these names that you mention here tells us a lot about the people who lived in the area.
Mm-hmm, it does. And in fact, some of the first supporters and benefactors of the museum are from some of the well-known manufacturing families within the community itself. And in this room, we have many gallery talks as well. Student groups come to the museum and we give them informal lectures. This is a view of the education office. All of the administrative offices and the storage areas within the museum are underground, and they're part of the newest part of the facility, built about 4 years ago. There's our wonderful old desk, the roll-top desk that was Sanford Lowe's. And you can see, again, some of the administrative areas. We also have a number of interns who work at the museum from surrounding colleges and universities throughout the country. And all of our various machinery as well. We're computerized, etc. Now you're entering the Alix Stanley Gallery, which is one of the first additions onto the museum, onto the old Grace Judd Lander's house. This addition was built in the 50s, and it houses early 20th century works. We have a very strong collection of American Impressionism and works by the Ashcan School. And this room also is really the focus for our lecture series, our many events, private events, as well as public events. And we're looking at a piano, which was donated by our Women's Committee. It's a Steinway. And simply because music is a very, very important part of our museum, we have a resident chamber music group.
Yes, tell us about that. Fidelio plays?
Fidelio is a resident chamber music group. The ensemble is composed of Harry Clark and Sonda Schuldman and Lois Martin. They've been with us for the last 2 years. And we're expanding our program with Fidelio in the coming year to include 4 concerts. There'll be open rehearsals, and we also work within the community. There are mini concerts in hospitals, retirement homes, and we'll be working with school children over the next coming years, 4th grade students.
I noticed too, Deborah, that there's a conference table, a study table in that same room. Do you have a library? Do people come to the museum to look things up or work on reference?
We do. We have a library that you saw when we first panned to the Sarah Peel portrait. We have a research room downstairs where the administrative offices are located. So there's quite a compendium of information about the history of American art that's available for students. And in fact, in New Britain as well, as you may know, Central Connecticut State University is literally down the road from us. And students will use our facilities, research facilities, and come to view the paintings. And we also have a number of art history classes as well as studio classes from the university who hold sessions within the various galleries.
So your audience is quite large and varied as well.
Diverse.
Let's see what else we have. We're looking at the New Britain Museum of American Art, and we were wondering about the conservation there.
Okay. Conservation, of course, is a terrifically important aspect of the maintenance of any collection. Within our museum, we don't have an in-house conservation staff. We belong to a consortium of museums.
Is that in Williamstown?
It is. It's in Williamstown, Massachusetts, the Williamstown Regional Conservation Lab.
So other museums other than you and the Williams College use that?
Yes, a number of museums, and it really allows each museum to have access to the state-of-the-art facilities, techniques, technology of conservation.
I should think that there's a lot of good things come from cooperating with something quite that important.
Yes, actually, it really expands exponentially what can be done.
Sure.
Because
especially for a small museum, a museum of your size.
exactly,
The need is still there. On-site is not necessary. Many museums, actually more museums, take advantage of that kind of an arrangement than those who are able to be quite so lucky as the Atheneum to have on-site conservation.
Exactly.
Now, while we were visiting your museum too, we were lucky enough to come upon your director, and he was nice enough to give us some time. Dan Dubois is your director, and let's listen to a greeting from him as we
I'm
visited.
Dan Dubois, director of the New Britain Museum of American Art, and I'm going to introduce you to a series of rather wonderful images painted by Thomas Hart Benton. They're called The Arts of Life in America, and they were painted in 1932 for the Whitney Museum in New York City. The murals are a product of Thomas Hart Benton's travels through the United States, where he collected a series of drawings, town after town that he passed through, recording what he saw as the vital arts of the people of America in the 1930s. And in these murals you'll see people playing music, playing cards, roping horses, and all kinds of everyday activities. Part of what Thomas Hart Benton was interested in doing was to produce an art that he considered truly American. These works are egg tempera, and that's a rather difficult and complicated medium to work in. And part of the vibrancy of the color and the intensity of the surface that you see after so many years of being with us is ascribable, I think, to the medium with which he worked. You'll be painting. This is the panel from Thomas Hart Benton's mural cycle, which is called The Arts of the City. It depicts both the social life of the jazz clubs, as well as the issues of prohibition and illegal bootleg liquor and the crime and corruption that many urban areas were experiencing. The mural is done in 3 sections, and originally when it was installed at the Whitney there were 2 French doors, glazed doors, that filled the alcove areas that you see in the panel. And below the wings to either side, those L-shaped forms that are part of this particular panel, were radiators. The rest of the room that they were in was lined with bookshelves with a large table in the center. The Arts of the South, which is the name for this particular panel, was brought together from a series of drawings that Tom Benton did on several trips through the southern states of the United States, and bring together both the sense of vitality and music and interaction of the people that he saw and drew and painted there, from religious gatherings to family events. I think it's one of the earliest paintings where one would find a whole pile of garbage, and a group that came just before Tom Benton, called the Ashcan School, were very much a part of this depiction of everyday life. Several years ago, it became quite evident to us at the museum that the murals were in need of conservation. The entire surface of the murals had begun to have paint which was cupping, rather curling up in very minute sections, and the surface was very unstable. Part of the process of creating these murals, Tom Benton put together his own mixture of gesso, which is a white paint underpainting that artists use to produce a ground. And in large areas of this painting, that gesso had become something akin to talcum powder. And so this very brittle surface of the egg tempera, which the works are painted with, was beginning to dislodge. Fortuitous to us, the Williamstown Regional Art Conservation Laboratory had been working with another mural cycle, the cycle that was painted by Benton just after these, that the Equitable Life Assurance Company had purchased, and had discovered some processes and invented some procedures to deal with the very special physical problems that Benton had faced the conservation world with. The area in this panel, which is called the Arts of the West, where you see a group of people playing cards, had rather extensive, very minute losses which had occurred, little snowflakes almost of paint loss. And the entire surface of the panels had discolored through time. The varnish layers that had been applied had yellowed to a point where it was difficult to understand the relationship of colors. The brilliancy that you see here of the reds and greens and blues and the intensity that that produces was not evident. Through consultation with Williamstown, we were able to first stabilize the works here at the museum and then have them shipped up in special climate control vans to Williamstown, where they underwent a process where the surface and the first layer of linen material that they're painted on was removed from a wooden support. The entire work was then stabilized on a hot table where the temperature of the painting is raised until the paint is able to begin to relax. And once that paint is relaxed, the painting was impregnated and in some cases injected with a material called biva, one of the new materials being used by conservators today. to allow those areas that had become unstable to have a material which would help them essentially glue back down to the surface and be brought back into plane, so that that curling of the surface in minute areas was able to relax and become part of what its original intention were. The paintings were then completely cleaned of the varnishes and dirts that had collected since the early 30s when they were produced, revarnished and brought back to us in time for a national tour where they were sent across the United States from Missouri to Los Angeles, and then brought back to the New Britain Museum of American Art and reinstalled in galleries which had been refurbished for that purpose.
There's that lunette in that room, the Benton Room.
Political business and intellectual ballyhoo, it's known as. It's an interesting piece to the entire mural, simply because as we're panning across, we can see that Benton has incorporated what we think of as high and low art. He's incorporated some cartoon figures, Mickey Mouse, Mutt and Jeff, into a fine art mural. And in 1932, this was really the first time that that kind of thing was ever done. Today, after the pop art movement, and Andy Warhol and Lichtenstein were used to that. But Benton was really the first to use that kind of marriage of high and low, as it were, because he really wanted to express the quintessential arts of life in America. And in fact, that mural and the whole mural series became quite controversial. There were groups who came forth who were offended by certain images in the Arts of the City mural that we saw. There were other groups. Stuart Davis, in fact, was teaching at the Art Students League and encouraged his students to sign a petition demanding the removal of the murals from the reading room and the library at the Whitney.
Imagine.
Because he felt actually that the depiction of African Americans was caricatured and racist. So that was one aspect.
I see.
And also within the political business and intellectual ballyhoo lunette that we saw, Benton was using his sardonic wit concerning his former leftist friends. We saw some of the caricatures within that mural reading the New Masses, for example. So the mural is actually chock full of a lot of social, political, economic, cultural commentary.
Now, as an arts historian, you've been an artist, an arts historian, an art gallery director. You get very much into, especially because of your curator of education work at the New Britain, you get very much into the interpretation of the art, don't you? And you oversee how the art is interpreted and how it is taught to various groups through the docentry and...
Exactly. There are a number of aspects to interpretation. Daniel Dubois and I work together on a number of exhibitions, and then on other exhibitions we'll work separately. We have different focuses. Interpretation can take the form of course, scholarly text. It can also take the form of educational or didactic labels. It can take the form of working with students, K through 12, working with teachers, integrating the history of art into other disciplines, or introducing the history of American art and culture in the classroom. So it's really an ongoing, multifaceted process.
That you oversee. Now, at the Wadsworth Atheneum, the staff is very much bigger. Were you saying that the curators, there were, what, 8 of them under Mr. McCackey, and would they then be the ones who would take up the interpretation of the art objects, pass that on to you for you to PR that, or how does that work in a place like yours?
It is a little more complicated, I suppose, but we have a strong education department too, and a curator of education who really oversees the interpretation to the public. The curators certainly do write the labels for the exhibitions and for the works in our permanent collection. Actually, one of the things we didn't distinguish in talking before is that we have a very strong personal collection, permanent collection, the collection that I outlined in a little bit of detail. And then we also have temporary exhibits which come in. So there's really a twofold need to interpret. One is to regularly do things to enhance our permanent collection, make people interested in coming back and seeing the treasures that we own.
Right. That is the real problem for museums.
And
how
that
to
is
keep
certainly the
rearranging.
curatorial responsibility to think about how the works that we own can regularly be either moved around or focused upon in new ways through programs or other things,
Right.
and through docent training. Then the temporary exhibits each time pose a special challenge. How are we going to hang them? How are we going to talk about them? Who is going to talk about them? And what are the programs? And again, these happen in teams where we do have curators, the education department, and then people who, like me, are concerned about the interpretations to the newspapers, television, the radio, and to our many members. We haven't also talked about the various support groups that relate to the museum, and a lot of those have a great deal of interest in the specialized aspects of the collection.
Because you each do have special interest groups. Is that what you are alluding to, the special interest groups? And some of them will have more of an impact in one kind of an exhibition or another.
Or the permanent collection.
Or the
They really
permanent collection,
focus
in
on,
fact.
on understanding our permanent collection and helping us to get other people interested and interpret it. For instance, we started a decorative arts group at the museum last year, and that group really has primary interest in the many objects that we have as well as furniture. And they have provided programs. They, through their membership dollars in their own little organization, they provide some dollars which can bring in a special lecturer on the decorative arts, or do other kinds of things.
Well, don't these special interest groups also do for you, from the museum point of view, is get people interested from one focus or another, so that they have a real connection of interest to the museum, and then with any luck at all, if they can, they will help the museum in terms of funding, helping to fund the various kinds of things that museums need patronage for. What are some of the special interest groups at the New Britain?
Well, our Women's Committee takes a very, very active role at the museum. They fund our Charles Ferguson lecture series, which is our primary lecture series.
So that you
during
get
the
people
year.
coming into the museum regularly.
Exactly.
That's very important.
And they work during the December holiday seasons with various children's groups and activities during that period as well.
I know that at the Atheneum there is a very important tree, wonderful tree decorating thing every year.
Festival of Trees.
A festival of trees, right? Many museums all over the country like that idea and do it, and gets many people to the museum, because that is, after all, what it's all about, visiting a museum and being there. And you have a cafe, which is very active.
Before you leave the Festival of Trees, I should say too that that is a Women's Committee project, that and Fine Arts and Flowers, a spring festival, but a lot of these great extravaganzas could not be staged by the staff. No way could they be undertaken or done. And that's where these various special interest groups and support groups do a major job of bringing in the public. Absolutely.
It's quite interesting to note, I think, that the Atheneum does, though, as I started to say, have a cafe. And I think someone has come up with some statistics about a cafe in a museum would not really work unless there were a very large number of people coming through, something like 100,000 people, so that it isn't the sort of thing that any museum can just decide to do. There's a real reason why your museum doesn't have added to its services to its community a restaurant, and yet you can at the Atheneum. And it's a wonderful restaurant, and people go out of their way to use it, to have meals there and to have arrangements catered, parties catered there.
As our director has often said, when a museum has a bad cafe, it's the most important subject for the trustees and for everyone. When the restaurant isn't doing well, it's a real disaster. When it's doing well, it is a very important adjunct to the strength of the museum. And we have, for the last 5 or 6 years, had a fabulous manager of the cafe. So we are very active in catering, too.
Well, we hope to meet everyone there under the beautiful stable sculpture in the outdoor cafe, and inside in the wintertime for wonderful teas on Sundays as well. I'd like to thank everyone really for letting us see the scenes behind the museum, both the Atheneum in Hartford and the New Britain Museum of American Art. It's been very interesting, and I'm sure it's been interesting for you too. I'd like to invite all of you to visit a museum nearby and take an active part in being one of the contemporary community citizens a museum has to offer and wants to record for history. I want to thank my guests, Deborah Frizzell and Muriel Fleishmann, for coming to the studio and talking to us, and for inviting us to your museums so that we could do those wonderful videotapes. And until next time, we'd like to say thank you and tune in again to Arts Talk next week.